a church that isn't filled with pain. What we're offering you is deciding you're going to follow Jesus' model and Jesus' methods. And you're going to have people that don't want to be a part of that. But if you think about it, Jesus would, like, you remember, he's walking with the crowds, they're all following him, he turns around and says to them, unless you eat my flesh and you drink my blood, you can have no part of me. Remember that? What happened? What happened with the people? They said, who can understand this? This is a hard saying, and they left him. Jesus turned to his 12 and he said, will you leave me too? And they said, where else will we find, Peter said, where else will we find the words of life? Peter didn't really understand what he meant yet either, because he hadn't done communion yet. He hadn't said, Jesus is looking ahead, and they left. And they said, Peter said, well, we're not leaving. We don't understand you any better than anybody else, but you have the words of life, right? Jesus focused on the small groups with the large groups in mind. If you really make disciples and unleash disciples that are mature in Christ and know how to make disciples, it appears, it might take longer, but you can reach the whole world. It actually, by doing this, will take time, but as you start to really do this, it will change the world. And it will go slow at first, and it will begin to become faster. Most people, while it's slow and hard, they quit. So when you're in a discipleship, or you're in a mentoring coach group, you're reminded of this. You're like, no, you're on the right track. 3-year elders quit, it's good. Those are businessmen given business roles in a church. They're not mature disciples, and you don't want immature people. You don't want to let your kids drive the car from the back seat. You got to make sure that and you get to talk through this. Stay on course, and you get encouragement and wisdom, and pretty soon you start seeing things change, and you start seeing the world reached. And again, I think as our culture gets more and more warped, if you start teaching the truth, there are less and less people that's going to. The Bible says in the end times, people will gather around themselves teachers who tickle their ears. But this is the right fight. This is doing it the right way, which means that we're not going to measure based on numbers going to a show anymore. We're going to measure something completely different. Disciples who can make disciples. And it will go slower, but your people will know how to disciple their own kids, will know how to disciple those around them. We will make inroads in real spiritual maturity instead of cultural Christianity.
That's good. Thank you, Jim. Scott Harris or Brandon, either or both. Jim just talked about a lot of pieces of expectations of maturity and stuff. When it comes to relationship, what are some expectations you would like to share if people go down this journey, just to give them kind of a clear expectation?
Yeah, I'll start. Let the pro jump in here. Relationship takes investment. So I think the very first thing, and I love what Michael was talking about, and Jim as well, there's a cost. We all want the easy road. Jesus never, ever gave us that. Right? It's going to be hard, it's going to cost, and the messiest, most costly element we'll do is invest in the world. If we look at what God did, He sent His Son Jesus into our mess. While we were sinners, Jesus showed up, and that's what we have to do. And it will be marked with pain, letdown. You will cry more tears than you've ever cried in ministry if you go down this road. But they're sweet, sweet tears. I think much like Jesus crying over Jerusalem, right? And so I just think that there's a cost to it. You have to understand it. It's full, again, of pain, but it's the most beautiful thing you'll ever do. So I'll let Brandon do it.
It is a cost. One of the things I remember Jim said to a pastor one time we were doing this, and Jim asked him a question. He said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I think that's something all of us, had to evaluate along the way, because this Jesus' methodology, as Scott was saying, it's not easy. If you are doing this, wanting to go down this road simply to grow your church, don't do it. But if you're looking at it from the standpoint of, I have to be obedient to King Jesus, period. Whatever that means, I'm willing to go down that road and to go and to invest and to make disciples. The other thing that I think you have to really evaluate is all of us come into these kind of things wanting to learn something new, wanting some things to take away, some, for lack of a better term, something to add to a program, whatever that might be. I would really encourage all of you to just pause for a moment, take off your pastor hat, take off the badge, whatever the role that you are in your church, and ask the question, am I being a disciple, and do I know how to make disciples? And this be something for you personally. Regardless of what another person in your church does, regardless of what a board might say, regardless of what a senior pastor is doing or not doing, that when we are called to make disciples, regardless of what somebody may be doing around us, we have to do that. It's one of the things I've appreciated, and I tell Jim, and he's not the best compliment receiver, but Jim is not perfect, none of us are. But Jim, I've watched him for 20 years stay committed to Jesus' methodology. Regardless of the trials or struggles, that we personally have to live this out. And that would be the part maybe that Scott said, it's a cost. It's not easy. We don't do this just to grow our church. We do this because Jesus said so. It's an obedience issue. And it has to come from within who you are, not programmatic being done.
It's good.
Look, let me just say it this way, because I think what we're trying to do is, we know people go to a conference and they're looking for like some way to grow their church. And this will grow your church spiritually. And think about it, you unleash a bunch of people who know how to make disciples, you will reach people, but in a different way. But I have to say this, as much as we're saying, I love what Scott said, as much as it's got pain involved in it, there's beauty in it. And just so you know, to have an eldership that's, every one of them are making disciples. Every one of them is in small groups. Every one of them knows what it's like. They're not sitting in a seat going, hey, you ought to do this and you ought to do that. They're doing it. To be with people who are spiritually mature and have your back and will look you in your eye and tell you when you're wrong, because they love you. The wounds of a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. To have a staff that's spiritually mature, that when you're wrong, they fight for relationship. They're not in it for a job. They're in it because it's a family, a brotherhood. You're not alone. You're carrying each other's burdens. You can confess your sins when you're failing. You don't have to hide or pretend. To be in that kind of a family, I wouldn't ever want anything else in my life. So the benefit of being a Christ follower and being in relationship with people who are spiritually mature is a strength that comes from a body of believers, not me at the top being, the one who's trying to do all this by myself. It's us together in relationship. Not only is spiritually maturity the ability to love and be loved, and that's true, and that's a process of growing. But to know that you're on a mission with other people too, and we're doing it together. Jesus sent them out by twos. It was never one person carrying the whole load. It was never a personality. It was always a team. When you define this correctly and live this out, there is nothing like it. And I've had the experience of both. So I'm doing life with spiritual warriors who love me enough to tell me the truth, to support me, and I them. I would never want to do it any other way. And there's too many people that are trying to serve the Lord without the benefit of Christ's church as He designed it which is all about relationship with God and each other and the journey. And there's so many people doing Christianity as a religion, and it's exhausting. It's painful without purpose. This is painful because there's people in it, but it's painful with purpose, and it's painful in positive ways, and it's amazing to be a part of something like that. And so many people don't have it, and it makes me sad because it's what Jesus designed. And so there's such positivity in it. I get to work with my closest friends, with my brothers and sisters. That's pretty awesome to be able to do that. And I want that for all of you.
Man.
It's good, Jim. You know, I got the opportunity to come on staff at Real Life Ministries. I came out of the business world, and so I did a relationship just deep enough to get the tasks done. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yep. And coming on as a key volunteer, you know, I get to know the Lord in real life, but then get an opportunity to serve, then get an opportunity to come on staff. There's a difference between doing a relationship just deep enough to get tasks done and really caring about somebody. And so for expectations of relationship, we talk about, what Jim's talking about, fighting for relationship is really literally like you're willing to actually cause offense, be offended, and work it out, and fight for relationship. And I think that most people are not very good at relationship, and they get hurt, and they take their ball and they go home. And so a lot of times discipleship doesn't work real well because fighting for relationship isn't done very well. And so I appreciate Jim giving me an opportunity to be on staff and learn to grow in my relational ability to care for people. And so I'm on the receiving end of that, so it's pretty cool to be on the receiving end of that. All right. What are some questions you guys might have? Raise your hand, we'll throw a mic to you, and fire away. So I'll jump at once. No, hold back, hold back.
I like maps about this time of day.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you guys all for your time and all you're doing. I wanted to ask now, your foundation that you guys use, DNA, whatever you like to call it, you stay consistent in doing that, and then you kind of repeat the process, or can you expand on kind of the process of what you do and how you're taking the relational aspect? Because you know, like separating system from what you guys are actually doing, or is there a little system mixed into it? And I need to clarify more. I kind of went over it with you, and you helped me a lot, kind of earlier.
Yeah, what your question is like, what's the system side, the consistent kind of system side of the disciple making?
Right.
And what are some components to that? Is what I hear you
Yeah,
asking. Is
yeah.
that close?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Okay. Everyone wants to answer that.
Okay. So I think there's a couple pieces of the system side of this. There's a small groups, if you will, structure that's in place. So everything that we try to do is built off of the philosophical, theological side. The relationship needs to be at the center of what you do.
Okay.
So we have small groups that we try to keep, between 12 and 8 people, because that's where relationship is done best. So we have people that will even coach a small group. They have 2 or 3 small groups that they're coaching. There's a coaching structure in place to work with the leaders. That it's the Jethro principle. It's continue to break it down into smaller pieces so that relationship can be maintained. That's a system side of it that all of us at some level within our churches follow and use, because philosophically we believe that you need to be in a relationship. That's a consistent thread through all of this. So whether, if I'm discipling folks, it needs to be 6, 7, 8, 9 people. It can't be 55, right? And so it's continuing to break that down from a system side. And a process side You know, in the white workbook, we have the wheel. We follow, when we see in Scripture, the spiritual growth stages that people go through. And so that's learning, what do I need to do with the person I'm discipling? And what do they need as they grow as a disciple? Where are they at in that process? So we see in Jesus' life, as he discipled them, we can actually see in the Scriptures them growing in that process. And so there's a spiritual process piece, there's a physical component of how we structure it as well that are there from that. But those are two parts of it as well.
I would add this, we have 5 components, right? He just mentioned those things. That is true of all of us that are in the network. So we kind of agree to these 5 components, and that's the biblical foundation of relationship, an intentional leader, help me out here, spiritual process, right? Relational environments, and church alignment. So those are things that we all hold true. Now, each one of our churches has their, what I call community flavor, but those are our core things that we practice.
Okay.
It's a common language. When I call him, we're speaking the language. When Jim coaches us, he's speaking the language. So it really helps us kind of hold that trail that we see Jesus model. And Jim alluded to it, and I want you to hear it. It's Jesus first. Our eyes on Jesus and his method, and then we've, discerned these 5 components from that, and we hold each other relationally accountable in that journey. We coach one another and lead up, lead down, and do that. So, but again, if you come to each one of our churches, you're going to see some nuances, and I would call it the flavor of our community. Right. I live in Seattle, not North Idaho. My church is going to look different than Post Falls, anything out there, right? Alabama, but Michael and I, we can talk about those 5 components.
And just something to respond, I thank you so much, you guys are just very helpful. And this may be going too far, I probably got to go to the thing to learn more about it, but when I'm very familiar with the Jethro model, I'm very big into that. When do you guys, so the relational person that's kind of leading that group, who's the one that's kind of discipling them? Is somebody pouring into them and then they're multiplying out of their own personal group? So they're seeing kind of who raises to the top as far as those are kind of hungry to be discipled more and more, and then raising those up to kind of plant 2 other relational pieces or in other areas? Or how does that work when you're actually raising somebody up out of that to be a leader? Because you talked a lot, Jim did, on discernment, discerning kind of who's out there, knowing, creating the culture and kind of knowing the audience, which I thought was, very powerful. And when do you kind of come to that conclusion, or what's kind of a model that looks like that you would be able to say, let's start something else or raise these other people up? Like, when does the disciple become the disciple maker, even though we know foundationally and culturally they kind of already are, because that's where we're going with as our DNA?
So the structure itself lends itself to raising up leaders from within the groups. For instance, about 3 weeks ago, I had to start a new group on campus because we had just exploded with a lot of new people wanting to get in groups. And I had about 5 families with a lot of children that would overwhelm any group that I had going. And so I talked to them about starting a group together. So I said, I'll jump in there with you because none of these people knew each other. They were all strangers. So I jumped in there with them on day 1. I said, somebody in this group is going to be leading this group in a few weeks. Okay. And so I began to model what we do for this group. And I did it 3 times. And after the 3rd time, I had a couple that said, we can do this. Let us jump in here and take care of this. And I'm like, cool. Awesome. So they're going to start leading it next week, and I'm going to watch them for probably 2 or 3 weeks and coach them up and meet with them aside from group. And then I'm going to hand that group off to them, and they're going to take it and go with it. Awesome. So that happens at very foundation. From there, so for the few weeks that I'm going to be a part of that group, he's actually going to be an apprentice leader, what we call an apprentice leader, because I'm training him to lead the group and take it. So when we identify someone who has potential, the way you do that is you share leading in the group. So I don't lead the group every week. I ask other people to lead the group. And through that, you will see people who have natural tendencies to be leaders and do a good job. And so then you ask them to be your apprentice leader. From that, once they go through the training, DS1 training, that's sort of our rule. Once you go through DS1 training, then you're ready to take a group, branch from that, and take your own group and lead it. From the leaders, then, here's the qualification to become a coach in our church, is once you branch a group, your job is to coach that other group. And I have 3 of my coaches here with me on the trip. And so all these guys have branched groups from their group. And so they become a coach, they continue to lead their group because we want them to stay tuned up to leading groups, not be disconnected and just coaching other. So they lead their own group, they coach the groups that they branched. And then currently I'm overseeing the 10 coaches that I have. So I meet with them regularly to make sure everything's going good in their groups, make sure the rosters are up to date, things like that. So that's sort of the structure that, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, no, it was great.
That's sort of the structure we do.
Thank you all.
Yes, speak to a group leader and like the disciple-making process. Speak a little bit to that. So how does a group leader play that out in his group? Do you know what I mean? Like, how would he, like, if you're saying, man, he needs to be investing in discipling, and kind of like, what does that look like a little bit?
So, the first thing I do as a group leader, and I train my group leaders to do, is on your first meeting, it's okay to say, this is my group, welcome to my group. And that's the only time you get to say that. After that, it's our group. So the group itself takes ownership. You give other responsibility to the people in your group. Because the number one reason that I experienced small group explosions or disbanding, whatever you want to call those, blowing up, is when a leader does it all. Has anybody ever been part of a small group? You were a leader and you did it all. So you made all the contacts, you made all the communication, you cooked the meal, they had it at your house, so you had to clean. Then when everybody got there, before they got there, you had to prepare whatever you were going to talk about, right? And then you had to talk for all that time. So there's so much pressure on them. They do this, and some people will do it for years, and then they come to me and go, I just can't do this anymore. And so as we implemented what we currently do, some groups, and this is for you folks that have transitioned, some groups chose not to do it. And so we said, okay, keep doing what you're doing. That's cool. We bless you. And within a few weeks or months, they begin to hear the other groups are doing so much better, and they just burn out quick. So when they blow up their group, we would just take their group members and plug them into one of our what we would consider healthy groups that are reproducing and place people in those groups, and then you begin to multiply. Now I've got off subject.
That's okay.
That was great.
So you start with, this is my group, and then you say, this is our group from week 1. You find your apprentice, you give different duties to everybody in the group. They take ownership, and you begin to talk about reproducing or branching, whatever you want to call it, the first time you meet. Instead of staying together for 2 or 3 months and then going, hey, we need to. By then, they've got clingy. They're like children being dropped off at the nursery. They're hanging on your pants leg, and they don't want to go away. They don't want to reproduce. So you have that conversation on day 1, and then you continue to talk about it, and eventually they begin to talk about it. Your apprentice leader says, when I branch a group, this is where we're going to go, or this is what I'm going to do, and this is who I want to take with me. And by the time you branch the group, everybody in the group's like accepted this is what we do. And then that plays out throughout your entire church. And then your church takes on that culture and DNA of reproducing groups, right? And then what happens when your church gets so full, you don't have seats for people, no parking in the parking lot. What do? We produce a church, right? We go plant a church, which we also do that, but that's for a later date.
No, that's good. Keep going.
I want to make one point too. One of the issues that I think in church we have, even in the small group system, is we turn the small group into like a Sunday school class, a one-day event sort of a thing. So that's not what we're talking about. You've got the big church that you meet in, and you're moving them towards small group where they start to connect, that overflows into doing life together. Last night, one of our families was moving, so the ladies and the guys were all at that house helping them move. Okay, I had a new couple come in this last season, and they're super shy. So I called one of the guys in my group, who's pretty outgoing, but his wife's shy, and I said, I would ask you to pray about taking them to coffee. See, most groups, everything's connected to you. You are the facilitator. Your goal is to be able to get relationships going in this group that spill outside of the group. They start doing life together so you can step back and participate. But you are constantly getting these folks to do life together, relationships, so that when there's a branch, branching groups is like a plane with two wings. Okay? We're talking about being spiritual family. So if you keep branching your groups over and over and over again, you're not really experiencing spiritual family. The church is supposed to be spiritual family, but it's supposed to also be on mission. Reaching the world, each of us disciple making, spiritual family. So what you do is you make sure both things are happening. So when we branch our group, we've got 3 couples that are together that are really close. I mean, everybody's pretty close, but these 3 are really close. When we branch, there's going to be 3 families that are doing life together, but now there's room for 4 more families in that group. The other 4 couples, they're really close, but now there's, as they branch with another group leader, there's a family wing, but now there's what happens if all you do is family? It becomes a clique. It becomes ingrown. This is our group. What happens if it's only branch? It's just ministry with no relationship. It's both wings. There's a tension there. Does that make sense to you? But the way that happens in your group is to get them involved in doing things. Most people don't think they can do it because they've never been allowed to, which is why he facilitates, hey, you're going to lead this part of the lesson next week. You're going to lead. Your goal is to tell them there's a purpose and they can. You're going to get them in relationship with one another. You're facilitating this, and pretty soon they start doing all kinds of stuff together. They start going camping together. They start doing life together. And so as a group then, I'm like, hey, you guys did life 3 weekends in a row this summer. Where's the mission being involved in the body of Christ? What's going on? Oh yeah, you're right. You know, and so you're leading and guiding, but there's tension involved in this process. Does that make sense to you?
And you asked a organizational question, which was good. So I know they're trying to answer it organizationally. I would add this piece just to it, which is really kind of cool. As being a home group leader, here were some of my responsibilities as a home group leader. Hopefully, I would be some level of a mature disciple maker, meaning somebody's invested in me, walk beside me, help me understand that there is a disciple making process and there's a maturing in that. And now that I'm leading a home group, I have to, what does it look like to create a relational environment? And can I figure out where my people are at spiritually in my group? Yeah. And then what do I do with them? There's a lot of intentionality in there. Our next 2 sessions, we'll dive into those pieces. So I say that to say that I was in a lot of business groups as a Christian, as a non-Christian, and small groups don't equal disciples by themselves. So the goal isn't throw everybody in a small group and try to close your back door of people leaving your church. That's not the goal.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right?
Amen, brother.
The goal is to make disciples.
Yeah.
True.
And small group and creates a relational environment for the potential chance for discipleship to happen. But
Yeah.
it takes those 5 components all working together.
Good stuff, brother. Good stuff.
Great.
Oh, you
Keep going.
thank
Another
you.
question? Yep.
My question was, I can see how this plays out in small group settings, among your elders, among your staff. How does it affect what you do on Sunday mornings, either sermon series, teaching, order of worship? How does it affect Sundays?
Good question.
Let's go. Take it.
Do it.
You gotta keep the main thing the main thing.
Amen.
And I had to learn that. I used to try to implement a disciple-making culture outside of Sunday morning. And so one of the lessons I've had to learn in this journey is this opportunity Sunday and what we do Sunday morning on the large group setting, we have to model discipleship there. For instance, when we started our church, I did not have one musician in our church, not one. Everything was karaoke style. So I brought in a guy that could play guitar. And when I was talking with him and getting to know the guy, and I knew him from high school, I knew him from somebody else's youth group, when I was bringing him in, one of the things that I said to him is, I want you. I'm not worried about stage presence. I want there to be a good stage presence. But you've got to be able to train up other people. Can you train up other people? And if you can't train up other people, you're not the right guy for me. Now, that guy can go anywhere else because I've got people who are there on stage that can help lead worship. I used to have to always, every time I went away to something, I had to bring in someone to preach for me because I didn't have anyone else in the congregation. None of the men had ever been expected to do that. And so I started implementing this process of, hey, let me pick a couple of guys, let me start giving them an opportunity to play. Let me give them an opportunity to get out on stage, start with communion meditations, being part of sermons, coming in for just a few minutes, and now I can ask them in advance. They're part of my sermon team. They help write sermons. They help formulate the sermon plan for the year and what we're trying to do.
That's big.
And so we bring it in every phase in which we can. I also, and I've learned this from these guys, we talk about discipleship a lot. We talk about relationships a lot. And one of the things that I've learned through these guys in real life and how they've lived this out is that you have to look at the Word of God through the lens of relationship. And when you start doing that, it's there. God is concerned about relationship. And I thought, man, there's just not a whole lot to talk about from a preaching standpoint when it comes to relationship. But when you start looking at Scripture through the lens of relationship, I got sermons I can preach for days and days and days and days.
Right.
You can bring anything into it just about, because God cares about relationship. He cares about, that's always been His plan, is to use people to bring other people to Him. That help?
One thing you can do too is you talk about the stories from your life group.
Yep.
This week at my life
That's
group,
it, that's it.
this happened,
That's it.
and it just blew my mind. One of the guys said this to me. You can point everything, guys. Today I'm going to say something, but just you life group leaders, be ready. I'm going to stir up something for you. You've got to be ready to answer some questions. And you just constantly promote. You baptize people.
Yeah.
The home group leader and the life groups are there, and you're celebrating not just the baptism, but the lives that played a part in doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim would say, do I really have to talk about this again? And I would say, yes, Jim, every single Sunday. And similar to what Michael's saying, and all of us, and now I'm senior pastor, and I say to my staff, do I really have to talk about this again? And yes, you do. And it has to permeate, it should permeate everything that we do and talk about. So it's woven through the sermons. I will probably have from the stage define a disciple at least once a month, talk about the gospel and talk about disciple making almost every single Sunday, because it is, like Michael said, the entirety of Scripture. The other part is on the back side kind of Sunday is asking your group, what do you measure as success? Is it more quantity about the numbers? Or is it in the sense of what I would call more as a quality? It is a number, but how many people did we connect into groups? How many people were helped to move in the process of disciple making versus just how many butts were in seats? So measuring movement in the process from Sunday morning is something we talk about every single Monday, of what that looked like. So I think, like Jim's talking about as well, what you celebrate, people will aspire to.
Yeah.
And celebrating those lives changed, discipleship happening, people getting connected, moving through the process is all part of Sunday.
Great question. Great question. What else?
Before you got started, I was discussing with the table leader. I asked him a question. He gave me an answer, but we didn't finish talking about it. But since the group of you is up there together, maybe you can finish this. The question was, how do you work with a pastor when he is telling you that he is not going to change for anyone, but yet he say that he is about kingdom building and making disciples?
Amen. Amen.
Great question.
I didn't plan this question, but I'm excited to answer it. I've got to be careful. So,
you
the
don't.
church that I was at prior to where I serve now, and I won't name it, we had a celebrity pastor, written books, famous in certain Christian circles and all that. So I went through a season, 18 years in ministry, kind of reinventing myself. And part of that journey was a book I had on my shelf that I hadn't read yet called Church's Team Sport. Pulled it off the shelf, read it. I could just tell there was a shift in my heart toward relational discipleship. I knew from that moment on I would never do it any other way than that because I saw Jesus so clearly in it. Okay, so that started me on the path. What do you do when you're in the second chair or below? You go to the senior pastor, say, hey, God showed me this. I'm excited. Let's go. Like, no offense to you senior pastors. I'm one now, so I can offend us all. We're very proud people. And so he says, great, let me write it. So he writes up this thing. It was just nutty. I was just, oh man, that's not it at all. And so I just kind of laid low and said, God, what do I do? And God said, you don't need any tag, any title, any permission. Just be a disciple who makes disciples. So I went underground. And I really did. I just started doing it. Didn't tell anybody what I was doing. And what happened, did that for about a year. I reached out to some of my friends that I knew, part of this network, and asked, hey, I needed to be coached. Have coached me, and they tuned me to this guy, so I was secretly being coached by someone from the RDN, and I was just doing it. I oversaw 16 ministries, right? That typical associate pastor thing, right? And I just started making every meeting a relational discipleship moment. A year later, people's lives are changing. I've never seen spiritual growth like this in 18 years. Phenomenal. And so I get a knock on my door. This is a scary knock. It's the chairman of the elder board. He walks in my office and he says, hey, you know that thing you've been doing? I was like, oh no, I'm fired. Here it comes. Right? I said, yeah. He goes, I want you to come to the elder board tonight. I want you to do that thing. Okay, so he leaves, but first thought, I'm going to get fired by the senior pastor. Now he's mad. So I went running in there, knocked on his door, and I said, hey, he said, I know, he came in here first. It's okay. And so I went in there and using Jesus' method, I rocked that board by getting relational. I saw men a week before Jesus, right? They got real for the first time in 18 years, right? Watching these guys come to Jesus. So in that, what if your senior pastor doesn't do it? You're called by Jesus Do not be discontent. You don't need any permissions. You don't need any titles. Just do it, right?
Great answer.
Yeah, so that's something we tell everybody. First of all, mature disciple is not divisive. It does not undermine. It does not gossip.
Great add-on.
It supports. Right? Do your job and do it well as long as somebody's asking you not to sin. But you can inject these principles into everything that you do. And when you're not working, no one's going to stop you from having a men's group in the morning. Especially when you're not guiding those men away from the big bad church over there, being undermining in any way. You're helping them to grow up in Christ. A lot of pastors, that's why we tell pastors to come in, because they come in from, like, they're the small groups guy, they're the youth guy, or whatever. And they're like, I can't make disciples because our church won't adopt this system. That's not true at all. You make disciples wherever you are. No one has to mandate to your church. Now, is it true if your church adopts that model and it's doing it all across the board, you'll get better fruit. More of it, yeah. But no one can stop you from making disciples, or even want to, if you're making mature disciples. If you're making division, you're undermining, of course they want to stop you in that. But if you're raising up guys who go to the senior pastor and go, dude, I'm just praying you rock it today. I'm praying that you preach the gospel today. I'm praying for you. You start raising up guys like that, who's going to have a problem? So, think individually before you start thinking corporately. Even that's what some of these guys have said. Don't go, I'm going to go back to my church and shift this and shift that. You may not have the power yet to do that, but you do have the power to shift you.
Right. Wow.
And when you start there, it's amazing what things happen.
Amen.
In your model, is there a distinction between small groups and what people commonly call discipleship groups, and how would those things fit together, or are they the same thing?
Yes, the question is there a distinction between, what I hear you saying, if I got this correct, is there a distinction between small groups or discipleship groups? Same thing, or are they different in our context? Is that correct? Yeah. They would be the same.
Yeah, they're the same. If it's a small group, it might be a small group of men, but the goal is still in that men's group to make disciples. It might be women, but in that women's group, it's not just getting together for a gathering. Now, again, we have some people that as much as we'd like to say all of our group leaders are knocking it out of the park, that's just not true. We're talking about what we aspire to here, not necessarily what we have everybody doing. We have different people that go through different things, that get less intentional, that get rebellious. Wherever you go, there's people. Right? But what we're saying is we aspire to this, and we make the course corrections when we discover them. So if you were to go, okay, there's 5 spiritual stages: dead, infant, child, young adult, parent. What's our number of spiritual parenting life groups that we have? 35 to 40% of our life groups. What's our level of young adult leaders? Another 35% probably, maybe 40. What's our level of children leading small groups? You see what I'm saying? It's what you aspire to, and the trainings and the coaching is taking them through. And the hard thing about people is you can grow, but I don't know about you guys. I actually got into a fight with my wife not that long ago, and I actually said this: you started it. And as soon as I said it, I'm like, that's super childish. Unfortunately, folks, we may be spiritual parents, but can slip right back into acting like a child this fast. Can I get an amen on it?
Amen.
Okay? So we have people that will grow, and then things will happen in life, they'll step back, which is why you've got to constantly, and which is why we have a relationship with each other. Because as pastors, I actually got into a big squabble not that long ago, and I was with Brandon when it was kind of I was in Texas, and it was going on in where I lived, and Brandon had to walk me through my immaturity in the way I was handling things. This is an ongoing process of relationship. No one's perfect. You can't expect that. But we're aspiring. By the way, everybody's like, I want to be a church where they're like the New Testament. Really? Because every letter Paul wrote was to somebody acting stupid. Right? So again, let's get realism on the table here. This is what we're all aspiring to, but we have our ups and our downs and our goods and our bads. And so every one of you can fit in the process and will. And not just in the spiritual parent role. Sometimes you'll be the child or the infant. And so, but this is what we're shooting for, and it takes a constant trust in the Lord, letting Him speak to you and through you, through others to you. This is the journey we're on. And so just understand, all of us here have group leaders that we don't even know they're acting stupid and they're acting stupid. Some, they're acting stupid and we don't know what to do. Some, they're acting so stupid, they pull us into their stupid. We get stupid while we're dealing with their stupid. Right? And so this is all a part of what we're doing.
That's good, Jim.
Just, I think this may help you with that question. We have a couple of things we do, ministries we do, but everything, at the core of everything is relational discipleship. One of my coaches leads a marriage class, an intensive. Now, we talk about that in small groups. We want small groups to deal with marriage relationships and things like that, but we've chosen to have a class that emphasizes that. So the room is set up much like this, and once they have their large gathering, then they break off into tables, and there's trained leaders at each table that leads through the conversation. So it becomes relational discipleship with the emphasis on marriage. And then we also do the same thing in financial discipleship. We have a financial discipleship class, yes. We don't look at the budget when it's behind. We do a series from stage and guilt people into giving. We do an ongoing, regular financial discipleship class. And in that class, I have leaders at every table. Once we break out of the large group, the leaders are relational. They give those people their information. They walk with them until they get them out of debt. And it's very relational discipleship in everything we do in every aspect of the church.
That's awesome. So if you have a heart and a passion to make disciples in and through real relationship, you want to know what is your next step to be part of the network, we'd say your next step is to sign up for Discipleship 1 2-day conference. And we will spend 16 hours with you with hands-on, intensive investment. And everything we do in the network is collaborative. Our Q&A is collaborative. All of our conferences are done collaborative. Our training is done collaborative. If you sign up for a DS1, we'll have about 20 different facilitators. We limit it to 100 people because we're going to have facilitators from all across the country, from different denominations, from different backgrounds, to different journeys, that have a heart and passion to disciple and invest into people. And they'll invest in you for 16 hours. And that's the first step. After that, if you say, man, I want to become part of the network, I want to go in this direction. If you say, I want to go in this direction, then we created a coaching model. That coaching model looks like this. You would get plugged into a group of somewhere between 4 to 6 other pastors. You would do a Zoom call. So every other week you would do a Zoom call for about an hour and a half. And on that call, it would be coached. Your coach would be at Mentor Coaching Church, who's had to shift their church, shift their ministry. They're going to spend time with you. They're going to do this in a group setting. Here's why. In the business model, this is commonly done in the business world. It's not often done in the church world. But in the business world, they've realized you can get business guys together and brainstorm and have synergy and problem solve really quick and fast. And so they pay a huge dollar for it. Okay? The church world is not done as often. But we have that model. So if you want to get coached and go in this direction, you'll join a group where there's going to be some things you have figured out in your context that you're going to be able to help the other pastors on that call, as well as the coach can help you. But there's going to be things that you're struggling with. And you don't have to do this all alone. there's people on that call that have solved things that they'll easily help you with. So I think we're a lot stronger together. So if you want to take a next step, I'd encourage you to sign up for a DS1. And if you want to continue down this direction of relational discipleship, I would encourage you to get plugged into a coaching group. That cost depends on the size of your church. It could be $150 a month, up to $550 a month if you're a big mega church. We try to make it super cost effective. Here's what we're counting on. After you get invested in and you start making disciples passionately, after 3 or 4 years, if we come to you and say, hey, would you be interested in coaching other churches? You'd say yes, because you just have to do it. That's what we're hoping, is that you have such a strong heart conviction, you have to do this the rest of your life. And you're willing to help other churches too. So that's how we're expanding our network, and we're investing in churches that are willing to invest in churches. All right, cool. Thanks for being here, you guys. I want to do 2 things. I want to bring up Mark Messy, and I want to have Mark share some stuff. Then we're going to do a table discussion. Do this. Raise your hands. You guys can handle it if you want. Thanks, you guys. Give a round of applause.